percussion section today, or me talking about like just lightly crash it. That's not, that is very unimportant because the rest of those students were Hispanic, and they were, and that's something that they understand very intimately. So it was a, it was a triggering moment for the students who had to also witness it. It was very nice when we saw them again a few weeks later, but it was, that in and of itself is a traumatic experience. And then you have to realize that you are the person who's just dealing with it the most. So I kind of took that. So this is like the beginning of my thinking about teaching as service, teaching as something that is meant to be almost a rebellious act. And so I took that idea with me to my first teaching job, which was at Rocky Mountain High School. So it's in Rocky Mountain, North Carolina. It's just the NASP Rocky Mountain Public School System. And so there I taught at Rocky Mountain Senior High School. So it was the namesake of the county. And it is also demographically 85%, at the time it was 80, it was around 85% black, and the 15 and about 1% other, and about 14 to 15% usually fluctuated white. And well, I went to the school. I didn't really know that much about the school. You know, it's your first job. You're taking who's offering you money. That is typically the first job. So I go and I just went in bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and a lot of expectations and a lot of hope. So that's not what happened, and a lot of that was dashed. But because the reality of the situation was much more grave. So think back to the demographics. I said that the demographics was 85% black, about 1% other, and somewhere between fluctuating between 14 and 15% white. So what we found out when upon working in that school, it was like the first couple of weeks, I was like, I know that the school is 85% white, or so 85% black, but it also is 15% white. Where are the white students? And I kept asking that question, and I kept wondering where the white students were. And then it took me not long to figure out that there was an IB program inside of our school. And by the looks of shock on some of your faces, you understand that the IB program's demographic was almost 95% white and 5% other. So now I'm dealing with a school that's segregated within a school. And now I'm dealing with that principal, which she's not actually the principal, she was just given too much authority. That person is negotiating with me to give her students after school lessons to be part of the band. But I've also got these students who are actually enrolled who are dealing with much larger issues, right? Like the first 2 weeks, within the first 2 weeks of school, a student was shot and killed on campus. And so we went to grief counseling for the first 2 to 3 weeks of school. And then there were retaliatory gangs that sprung up from it. So like this is happening pretty much at all times, but you also have a system that is holding down one group, or is intentionally lifting up one group within the walls of another, and they only put it there to help out with the demographics at the large level, like literally looking at the statistics. Like if anybody was looking at the state statistics the same way that I was looking at, they would see that the school is 85% black and 15% white because they are all Rocky Mountain High School students. So this has awoken some new thing inside of me that has supercharged all of the like servant mentality that I thought about beforehand, and it kind of gets itself and hyper kicks itself into gear then. So I spent a lot of my time at Rocky Mount. What I called was what I said it was almost a rehabilitation moment. And the year was about helping the students reimagine what is music, what is Western notation, because they had a real problem with the concept of Western notation. Like the idea of written notes, like scores, they had a real problem with that. And it wasn't a problem that was like, A, also I couldn't read it, but B, also why does it matter, right? Like my music doesn't do that. My music isn't taught that way. I learned how to sing in church. I learned through oral traditions. this is very white. And so we had to, so it was a lot of learning. It was learning from students, learning from me, and a very circular pattern of refinement over a school year. And it was a very dirty process that went, that it had to go down. But it was one of those things where you kind of look at the students and you go, all right, I'm going to do it until I can't. This is a huge mentality that I kind of took with me. Just that is the thing that embedded inside of me at that point. It was the idea of like just pure resilience and the idea of purely just looking at a situation and being very determined about that situation will not overcome me. I mean, there were days where my mantra was, I am being paid, they are not. And sometimes that literally sometimes helps you just think like they are children, they don't know what they don't know, don't get too mad. And that was, and so that's a skill in and of itself, but it's something that came out of a very harsh reality. So I resigned at the end of that year out of ethical disagreement with the administration of the school, starting with the 85% school being black, 15% of it being white, then the IB program being almost exactly the opposite. But B, also the way that that was the root of it, right? That is a very clear example of a root issue. And from there, it blossomed into many other things. That year, I say that year ended with me looking at the Drug Enforcement Administration at the front doors of the school for summertime being released, and they just started zip tying people's hands behind them and loading them up on giant trucks to arrest them. So it's just a very fascinating. It was a very fascinating place, but fascinating in like the worst senses. But it was the ethical concern that I had was why is the school system not doing more to protect these children? Why is it every time that I as an educator go and tell the principal that something is wrong at a fundamental level, I am being reprimanded? So there's just I just was like, all right, cool. My first year is over. I have the experience of doing something. For ethical reasons, I cannot be complicit in this system. So I left and I went to a place called Currituck High School. So I traveled like 2 hours further east. And Currituck is in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. So this is like the coast. I lived in, so Currituck is like the top northeastern corner of North Carolina. So it's going into Chesapeake, Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia, and Virginia Beach. So a lot of the students had a lot of ties over to those areas. The school was 95, it was like 90% white, mixed economic status. So in this case, what it meant was you were either really poor or you were really wealthy. There wasn't a lot of middle class in the county, which is pretty reflective of the country. The other identifying marker about that county was that 73.33% of it voted for Donald Trump in the last election. So, and it's also known as colloquially as a sundown town. So a sundown town is basically, you just say, the full definition of it is Black people, you better be out of here by the sundown. So it was one of those towns. It was very strange. But I also cut my teeth there. That is where I got the most experience about being an educator. It's also where I got the experience of running a program, building and running a program. The program when I got there was about 60 students, and then when I left, it was about 120. No, 130, between 130 and 140. We spent a lot in this ensemble. The program was only made of 2 ensembles, I think. Sorry, 3: jazz band, marching band, and then the spring concert band. And then by the time I left, there were 7 or 9 ensembles. So the idea was, when I got there, the idea was I want to sit and I want to understand what it means to build musicians, to build students, to build functional human beings. And so that's really where I got a lot of that experience. But I also got a lot of experience there dealing in just concepts of tolerance and the idea of there are people in the world who are different than you. Don't point and stare. Like that, like we were going through lots of cultural shifts as well within the program. So I feel like I learned a lot about what it meant to be big E, an educator, when it comes to student development in particular. So, I mean, that's pretty much the teaching aspect of like public school teaching. Now, the only thing, the couple of the things there was that I also taught for the boarding school that I went to, the South Carolina Government School for Arts and Humanities. I also teach for them. I've been teaching for them for about 8-9 years now through their Ignite program. And their Ignite program is a program that is now focused on students who are impoverished or underserved youth throughout the state of South Carolina and giving them arts exposure education. So these are places that are like, I'm thinking like the low county of South Carolina or the most northern parts of South Carolina, getting closer to like the exurbs of Charlotte. So thinking like Gaffney County in the north, and Kings County or Charleston, like where the Charleston area is, that kind of area for the lowest part of the state. And I'm the lead teacher for that program. And the idea is that I go in with a team of arts educators, and we go and for a week, usually per session, in total about 4 weeks, we go in and we work with students who don't receive arts education during the school year. So think about the fact that like accreditation exists and there are people who still don't receive an arts education in the state. So my job was it's a pithy, it was really just a sprinkle of water on a raging fire, but we go in and we try to expose them to ideas that they may not have had before, or exposure to experiences with art and music and dance and creative writing and theater production and that kind of stuff. We put it together and we help those students just learn new ways of expression and learning new ways of understanding themselves and the world around them. Maybe thinking about the world in an inquisitive mindset, but through an artist's lens. And so we try to hit as many big targets as possible, knowing that we have very short amount of time with those students. So that's kind of the extraneous thing. And then finally, like I now at the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music, so it's colloquially known as CCM. And I'm here for music education. This is my second year, and I'm an Albert C. Yates Fellow. So I'm here. So the Albert C. Yates Fellowship is meant to identify students who are underrepresented within their field, but are also present high excellence and high aptitude for pushing their field further. So that's kind of that's my funding here through that under the guise and under the mission of the Albert C. Yates Fellowship. So that's pretty much it. I guess, one last thing. While here, I conduct the Cincinnati Youth Wind Ensemble. So that's a audition group that pretty much we get students as far northwest of us as Indianapolis, and as far south as like Covington, Newport, and yeah, we haven't gotten anyone from like Lexington yet. But so that's a pretty large span of students. But these are students who come from like BOA schools like Walnut Hills, or like thinking on that caliber. So it's very interesting to work with those kinds of students because they are highly gifted and highly accomplished within their own rights as youth, like as being high schoolers. These are typically freshmen through seniors. Typically, these are juniors and seniors, but a lot of them are conservatory caliber level students. So a few of them, I went from teaching them to also now being their classmate or being their graduate student because they've been accepted into the conservatory. So it's it was a fun time. It was a fun time before the pandemic happened, and so we're kind of on hold with all that. So, other than that, that's my background. If you guys have any, I'll open it up now for questions. Who's it gonna be first?
Maggie.
Do you want me to ask a question, or do you want me to ask the question I sent?
Either is fine.
Um,
I just have like the questions that I saw were just unmarked questions, so like I know generally that they're there. I know what generally the questions were, but I don't know who they were for.
okay. Well, one that I didn't ask in the document, but I guess I'll ask now is, what is your opinion on like the education system? Do you think that like the arts can continue in late stage capitalism?
The future. So we have already decided since 1801 that music is part of the standard education. So we have like Lowell Mason in 1801 in Boston. He decided, he propagated the concept that music is a fundamental need and need for exposure and teaching inside of a school in order to create a full and robust human being. Now, that was 1801. We've clearly gone through a lot of things since then, and the concept of late stage capitalism definitely is playing into this whole concept as well. The answer I'm going to give is it has to stay. We have to do our jobs as educators to advocate for its cementing and lionization inside of our curriculums. We've already seen, especially throughout the South, lots of schools having their arts education programs taken away or are underfunded and defunded so poorly that there's no way for it to actually exist in any meaningful way. And it really is on us as educators, unfortunately, but it is on us to be the advocates about what music and what music education actually means and arts education actually mean for students. So if we think about, I think about the brain a lot, just like just literally the brain, psychology, neuropsychology, like what is actually happening. And we think about the concept, like we have well documented that music does things to the brain. The music is a function of the brain that we can track, we can measure, and we can observe. If that, and there is a, and we all feel a need to express ourselves through music. And that's not just because we're musicians, it's actually just humans and organisms in general create music. They create song patterns and tonal patterns that are purely for expressing whatever pithy emotions passing through them at that moment, right? So if this is a need biologically, and this is a need inside of us, and we have a drive to do this, and we also have well documented neuroactivity when we do music, when we listen to music, and when music is happening around us, and it actually has proven to help push and propagate and expand and build on different centers of the brain to help, like thinking about language, right? Like it helps build out the language centers of the brain. If that's really what it's doing, why are we getting rid of art? Why are we getting rid of music? Why are we doing that? And we're doing that because of, I mean, you said like late stage capitalism, like is it, we think about principals not being lead teachers, we think about principals as being a class of administrators who never really have to know what's happening inside of a classroom. And so we have to demand more of our principals. We have to demand more of our administration. And B, we also have to really advocate for the cementation of music education inside of our classrooms. So real life example, in Currituck, the problem was, so Rocky Mount funding was never an issue because it was a large county. The tax revenue was coming from the other side of the county where they had lots of property, they had lots of things that were taxable. And so that helped us out. So money was never a problem. But at Currituck, money was always a problem. I almost never had what I needed beyond like the first $2,000 or something. And so whenever whenever I had conversations with my principal, not at first, it was mostly the last principal I had. The school had had a rotating door kind of with principals, but the last principal I had, it was a negotiation. It was not these students need this. It was almost a hostage negotiation. It was, why do you really need this money? And it's like, I don't I don't understand. These children are just trying to play Yorkshire ballad, and I just need to be able to buy the music. So it's like, why do I have to argue for my textbooks, but the science teacher doesn't? Music, our sheet music is textbooks. Like that is, sheet music is textbook. It is the same thing. We cannot do much of our work without written notation in the form of like sheet music, in the form of method books, in the form of lead sheets, in the form of just at the basic need level. So, I mean, we we have to be better. Like we have to, as educators, understand our roles as that we have a lot of power, especially as a collective. There are always going to be more teachers than there will be administrators. The point of administration is to coordinate the teachers and to help maintain a sense of culture inside of the building and help maintain a sense of discipline inside of the building and to help help give the many teachers who are working in Legion, a guiding principle and a guiding vision for that building. And so we have to do, I mean, I think it's really going to be a lot of you all who are going to help push this, because you're going to walk into schools and you're going to realize that's not what's happening, especially throughout the South. And it's going to be on you to be the ones who go, that's not right. That doesn't look right. Why don't I have money for textbooks? And mean that when you say Yorkshire ballad. So that's my answer that's my very long answer for you. We can go on to the next one. Dr. Loboto, who you're going to call in next?
Zach.
Sorry. I had one and then you called on my name. I guess, how would you go about working with and helping like students that come to you who have like really difficult and tough backgrounds, like they come from like bad families or bad neighborhoods, whatever? How would you go about helping them?
Okay, so it happens. It will happen. That is statistically, it will just happen at a frequency that is higher than you would hope. So first and foremost, it's treat them like a person. It's talk to them and engage them where they are. So when I think about people who have difficult backgrounds, I actually just try to think about them more like they're people who have traumatic backgrounds, right? So like I think about them in the sense of something bad happened. What would you want to happen? How would you want another human being to approach you if something existentially bad had happened to you? And so from there, it's very case specific. It's what do you need? So like some students, it was the bad thing that was happening to them was a bad home life. It was a broken home. It was mom and dad are constantly fighting. There might be multiple partners floating in and out of the house at any given point. That kind of like sense of like they lack a sense of home. And that's one that you'll see pretty frequently. But in that case, what I found was that whenever you help your lowest student, you're always helping everyone else. if you can lift the floor of how your students are experiencing life, you will fundamentally change the experience of even the students who are doing well and the students who are not having these same experiences. So in my case, especially at Currituck, or at all times, both at Currituck and Rocky Mount, they manifested themselves differently, but I kept creating the sense of home at all times. The idea was that this is a safe place. We are all here together. We are going to make mistakes in front of each other, and it is okay. It just means that we as a group are going to be better tomorrow than we were today. And so getting that into children's mindsets, especially of children who have not been socialized to think collectively, that was the biggest issue. And that usually helped my students who oftentimes were the ones who were feeling like they didn't have a sense of home. And so that was one kind of social malady that I was dealing with. I mean, we had students sometimes, like I had one student whose mother was needed a new kidney, so she was going to dialysis every week to have her body to go through the process of dialysis and having her body flushed. And so, what does that mean for the student? It means that she is going to be gone a lot. She's not going to be able to. Yorkshire ballad means very little to her, right? Like Yorkshire ballad is here. Mom's survival is way up here, right? So so that gets you to another question: is how do you bridge the gap between the ephemeral need of I need you to play the right note, honey, versus she probably played the wrong note because she was thinking about her mom because something happened today, right? So it's like, how do you balance that, right? The balance is you are an empathetic person. You have to be extremely empathetic. You have to be extremely empathetic. There's no way you can do it without that. Because you're gonna have students who, even if home life is perfect, which it isn't, but if home life is perfect, they're gonna still have a bad day. Someone's still gonna break up with them. Someone's gonna have an upset stomach. Mom's gonna yell at somebody on the way out of the car. Hasn't gotten an apology yet. Someone may have punched their brother that morning, happened twice, and that might send them into a whole other frenzy of things. I mean, kids are weird, man. Kids are weird because humans are weird because we're all as unique as you are, so are they. And you're gonna have to learn to deal with 150 different personalities and 150 different circumstances. And it's really just going to take an empathetic eye and an empathetic mind of understanding what's going on and not immediately thinking that your mission is more important than their lives. Right? Like my mission was to give quality music education, to create in that school a sense of culture that was higher than the one that was existed before, and to help push those students and explore and help them explore new ideas, new concepts, new experiences in as many faceted ways as I possibly can. I mean, so like the same school. So think about it. These are still kids who are like either they work as their parents work as cleaning people down at the Outer Banks, like in the rental homes, or their dad is the president of Southern Norfolk, the railway station, right? Like so, like those two people are sitting beside each other in the same trombone section. What do you do now, right? And so you always aim at the lowest kid. Never aim. I almost never aimed at the highest kid. I always aimed at the lowest kid because they are the ones who you're doing this for. The other ones would have been good on their own anyway. And then just learning and teaching them to communicate and to cooperate as a collective inside of that ensemble. And honestly, that circumvented a lot of my problems. Many of my problems I never really dealt with the same way as other teachers had to deal with because I dealt with them as humans first and I dealt with them empathetically first. I treated them like they just needed a place to be. So what is the manifestation of that? It's the kids called me dad. It was weird for a little bit, but I loved it after a while, and I cried on the way out as they all like hugged me and said dad. I'm a queer black man teaching these students in Currituck, North Carolina. It's got a straight white bro saying dad, I don't leave, right? Like they clearly have moved somewhere. They have moved from one place of being to another place of being. So that also is by aiming at the lowest student and giving them more experiences and helping round out their lives, it made the higher functioning students or the students who have less obstacles in their way, it made them become also more empathetic human beings. And it made them understand the concept of being in a collective. So, I mean, so there are lots of ways to tackle that problem, but the ultimate problem and the ultimate issue is going to be deal with them empathetically. Deal with them as who they are. They are not Paganini. They are also not Jeff Bezos. Right? Like they are Lily. They are Hannah. They are Emily. They are who they are. And they are 13. And you've got a job. So that's pretty much it on that one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Am I gonna have to call on someone again?
I think they like it.
I'll go. Can you hear me? Hello? Okay, good deal. This is a little bit off topic of what other people has been saying, but how do you balance your life as a music educator? Because obviously, for the most part, you're doing more than other teachers would do. You have ensembles, you have pieces, you have maybe lessons with students. How do you not go crazy, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Who says I didn't? Well, I guess there is a certain level of insanity all public school teachers kind of accept into their lives. So there's that. But on top of that, I don't know, you gotta be very intentional about it. You gotta look at parents and say, I realize you want to talk to me right now, but it's 5 o'clock and I gotta go to dinner. Like I gotta go walk my dog. I gotta go, like life continues on outside of the 4 walls that is your band room. And so what I had to learn was just efficiency. Efficiency is really what it is. Like if you give yourself 12 hours to do something, most of the time you'll just take the 12 hours to do it. So if you gave yourself 2 hours to do it instead of 12 hours, you usually will get done in about 2 hours. So it's it was really just taking a hard look at myself and saying, what's not working? And really just being very honest about it. The other thing I did was I got a therapist. That also helps a lot. Like, don't discount therapy because teacher burnout is so high. Teacher burnout is usually, it is like the teacher burnout right now rate, I think the last study was about 3 years. Most teachers don't make it out of their 3rd year. And it's because most of the time we walk in bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and ready to take on the world. And that cannot last. It just can't. It cannot last. It either will be beaten out of you or you will run away. And so there comes a point where you just have to look at something and go, I'm done. This is the end of the evening. 3 o'clock came around. I managed to get all my work done today. I'm ready for tomorrow. I'm going to leave. And that just had to be the thing. So it was looking at your schedule and being good and being a good steward of your own time. Because think about it this way, you're never going to get that time back. So I think I calculated it 1 week. I think 1 week I spent 90 hours with students. In a 40-hour week, in a 40-hour work week, according to the song that I learned in high school, I worked 90 hours that week with students. And so again, it's kind of getting back to Zach's also answer. They're all still connected. It's the creating a home, right? Like this, you are spending more time with the students than their parents are in some season, like in a marching season, honestly. So you just learn to sit yourself down, look yourself in the eye and go, nope, I'm not doing that. This is done for the day. And then also the home idea, the concept of home wasn't just for them, it was for me too. Right? Like if I'm spending 90 hours a week with you, I want to like the people I'm spending 90 hours a week with. Right? Like, and if you need to be taught something new in order for me to like you because you're intolerant right now, then fine, I'll do that. And then next week hopefully it's better. But it's that's how you do it too. And it's also helping, and that will really help the burnout idea too. If you like the kids, and if the kids are really adding to your life in a way, the kids in my school in Currituck and all the schools I taught in, they added to my life. I still like my sense of humor is their sense of humor. They taught me how to tell a joke. I got better over time because they taught me how to do this. I had a kid tell me once, he was like, roses are red, violets are blue. My emotions are blue because there's one less gorilla in the Cincinnati Zoo. And then I ended up moving here. So then like the first day I moved here, I'm like giggling the entire day because this kid at a marching band competition right beside a bus while we're waiting to go onto the stage is telling me this dumb joke of a poem, right? So that helps you understand, and that helps you make it through those hard moments and those moments of like, I have a lot I have to do because we are doing actively a lot more than other teachers in the building.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
All right, who else?
I'll ask my question. This is kind of like a broad general question, but what made you choose to pursue a career in music education?
You're not gonna like this answer. No one ever likes this answer. I think I've told Dr. Laboda this once or twice. But like I at first didn't want to be a music educator. I was like, I'm gonna be the world's greatest saxophonist. No one's gonna stop me. I'm gonna make it all the way through. So my dad is a lot more practical than I am. And he is just an old man. And he really likes the idea of stability, so that's always fun. So he was like, and he's an educator, and he was a superintendent of the school district that I grew up in. And so my family is like a family that our trade is education and dealing in thoughts. And so he was like, why don't you give it a try at the very least? See if you like it. And if not, then you can be a business major. And I was like, all right, cool. So I tried out for the first semester or two. And I was like, I had my arms crossed the entire time, had the stone face. I was like, ain't nobody gonna change my mind. I know exactly what I'm gonna do. So then foolish me didn't realize that I love kids. So the first minute that I got to go out and like work with kids, I immediately fell in love. And then like I went home for like a break or something. My dad was like, "Are you gonna be an educator?" And I was like, "Shut up, yes, I am." But I mean, but that's how I got there. It was not like I joined up in college and was like, I'm gonna be a music educator. It took a second. It took like the entire first year for me to get there. But once I realized like I love kids, I love working with kids, I love the idea of teaching someone something new. I love the look in their eyes when they learn something new. I just really love the spark of potential inside of other humans. Is what it really comes down to. And that's what kept me on the path, and always has been the reinvigorating thing about it. It's basically my guiding question is what we're doing snuffing out that spark, or are we blowing onto that spark to fan the flames? And we should always be doing things to fan the flames of that spark of potential inside of other human beings. And I've always been interested by that. Thanks, Al.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, on a daily basis, what does a day like before you started teaching? What would a normal practice day look like? How would you balance practicing with your other classes? And what you would do every time to warm up before practicing throughout the day?
In school or as a teacher?
I guess kind of like, if it makes sense, both kind of like in college, but also going into student teaching as well as full time.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like kind of do like a comparative analysis of them.
Yeah.
Okay. So in undergrad, Dr. Laboda can probably attest to this better than I can. but it was about, I think we averaged about 6 hours of personal practice a day, and then like whatever like ensembles we were in, like because your job at the time really is like to be a musician for the university, and as well as being a budding educator. So it was like balancing that concept. I just took school surprisingly seriously, which really flabbergasted my entire family. But it was it was 5 hours. I think it was usually about like an hour before after my first class, because I'm not a morning person, and about like 2 hours around lunch, and then about an hour or two towards the end of the day. Usually that was just practicing whatever I got told I was bad at that day. And so in the warm-ups was usually like, I think we did, Dr. Stusek had like a little packet, but it was a lot of like whole tone scales, a lot of pattern, like just tonal pattern scales. So like thirds, fifths, sevenths, sixths patterns. So like just being able to go up the pattern that way, up a scale that way. Lots of, I focused a lot of my time on tone, on like the concept of, does whatever note I play, wrong or incorrect, does it sound good? Because that was Dr. Stusek, that was kind of his big thing. It was just no one really cares what, no one cares how fancy and how fast it is, but if it sounds bad, no, like it literally sounds bad, no one cares. And I kind of took that with me throughout my teaching experience, because like if you listen to all of my groups, they all just sound good. Like even if they play the wrong note, like it's just a good sound. So that was undergrad, but I had a lot more time to myself in undergrad. In teaching, I think it went from about 6 hours a day to about an hour a day at most. And that was like if I could like manage to scrape myself off of the floor when the day was over. But what I actually learned was that over time, that was when I started. When I eventually got through it though, I was back up to about 2 hours a day, which is actually a lot for a full-time teacher. Because you think about your primary mission is working with kids. Your primary job is to teach kids. I kept my skills up both to stay ahead of the kids, but also to be able to take gigs around the areas. So I was in a jazz band. I was also playing musicals around. I think I played at Regent University at one point. That was fun for a lot of weird reasons, but it was. But so we did. It was a lot of that, and then so in teaching, my focus was less on literature and it was more on just applied skills. So again, tone, patterns, keeping up the dexterity, being able to, and then occasionally benchmarking myself with like my senior recital. And then also learning and then using those skills and applying those skills in an efficient way towards new applications that were coming up. So like you get to the real world and you realize I have to teach 40 hours this week, but this weekend I have to play at Regent and I have not looked at any of the musical numbers inside of this 3-hour musical. So you get to the point where you're like, okay, my practice is also my teaching. So it's the concept of like, if you don't know something, you can't teach it because you don't know the full concept of it. You don't know also what it's not in order to be able to steer someone else in the right direction. And so I would oftentimes just use the lessons that I was teaching my students as a reinforcer for my own skills of applied skills for saxophone and musicianship out in the real world. So you just get more efficient is the answer. It's less time, but you just have to learn to be more efficient.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Who's next?
We have time for one more quick question.
I'll ask. What was your favorite memory teaching public schools?
I took, so Currituck County, those kids, I took them to Disney World one year, which was, that was heralding. And it took an entire year to do it. So I had to start the summer before we went because it ended up being like an $80,000 trip. So like I was so stressed out. There were days where I'd have like $10,000 to $15,000 in my like office, just sitting in my office, and I don't think you've ever seen a man sweat that much. It was the kids would all the time just be like, are you okay? You look a little flushed. I'm like, go away. Go away. I know what you're doing. You're terrible human beings. But I think the thing about it was that it was so much hard work, but to see these students who a lot of them hadn't even left the hour radius of Currituck, which is basically a giant cornfield. To see the looks on their faces when we pulled up to like the Magic Kingdom, and like you could feel like the pure unadulterated excitement on the bus, and you could just hear them like just so much joyful noises and so many joyful noises, and like, hey, look at that, oh my god, I've never seen that, and like taking out pictures and like just looking at things and just fellowshipping together and just being together. It was, for me, a very joyful and very profound moment. It was a moment of the concept of like, this is what it means to create a family out of people who aren't related. This is what it means to have an entire group of people on the same page about what to do next. And it was a beautiful moment for me. And it was like a week long. They went and they played they did like a recording session. They got to play the soundtrack for The Lion King. They got to learn from like a Disney conductor. I mean, it was just a phenomenal experience that they had not, and their families had not been able to provide for them up until that moment. So yeah, that's probably my most cherished teaching experience.
Okay, we are out of time. You ended right at 8:30. You're the best. Look at you.
I'm getting better at time.
What?
I'm getting better at like just the concept of time.
It's hard sometimes. But thank you so much. Everyone say thank you. Unmute. Say thank you. Go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. That was joyful. I don't know what about it, but it was nice.
Thank you. But we're done. You guys can all leave. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.